Welcome back to the What's Next class Survivorship edition. I'm Dr. Dave Bullis. I'm your host. I'm the Director of Ambulatory Behavioral Medicine here at the clinic. And this is episode 7. These are special topics that are sort of not long enough to devote an entire episode to, but important things that we want to kind of cover. So some of them include, they're not really related necessarily to medical treatment or health in general, but they are very common side effects of the cancer treatment process. Some of them are things that we can help you with here, and other things that we would refer you out for, but it's important just to sort of put them on the radar screen as common topics. Financial toxicity. This is just the idea that the cost of getting treatment is more than you have income or resources to match. And this is really the idea that when the cost of getting better and staying healthy is more than income and savings and resources can manage. It's actually very common, much more common than people realize, and it occurs both during treatment and can continue into survivorship. And it happens into survivorship mostly because that's when some of the bills are finally coming due. And it's largely due to this high out-of-pocket costs for medical expenditures that are happening at the same time as reduced productivity and loss of earning potential. So you can't go to work, so you're not earning the money, and then you have more costs. So that's where financial toxicity arises. And it turns out there's a fair amount of non-medical related costs like parking fees, equipment, transportation, dietary changes, even things like higher electricity bills because you're home more and you're watching TV all day, and the lights are on, so that you wouldn't normally have that, but now you do. And what we found and what the research really shows is that financial toxicity can and has been shown to be an impediment or a barrier to even medical compliance. Because if you can't afford to take the medication every day as ordered, some people say, well, I'll just take it every other day. But unfortunately, that means that the medication treatment's not as effective. So that's why this is important, and we want to make sure we know about it. So what can you do about it? Well, the very first thing you want to do about it is tell your medical oncologist about it. I mean, it's very important for the medical oncologist to know that money is tight. There are times when there are equivalent treatments in terms of the research has shown that they're equivalent for your type and your specific situation, but one has been around longer than another, so it's now cheaper to get than the latest one. And so there may be less costly alternatives to the treatment you're getting. And then there are also sometimes the pharmaceutical companies have cost offset programs and other programs that they can see through, but they need a doctor to make the request. So if you tell your medical oncologist, look, this is really putting me in a financial bind, oftentimes the doctors can send a request into the pharmaceutical company for some kind of financial break or discount. That doesn't happen all the time, so it's not like it's a guarantee, but it's very important for the medical team to know this additional stressor in your life. The Cancer Center has certain charitable funds. One of them is the LE Fund, the ELLIE Fund, that can help with certain non-medical costs. And so we can tap into that if we know about it. Our social worker is extremely skilled at knowing what some of those funds are. We also have a financial counselor who is part of the treatment program here. And that person can really help you exercise and make sure that every single element of your insurance policy is being accessed. There are times when the insurance company won't go out of their way to pay for something. But if you recognize that there are certain benefits within your other insurance policies, that there are ways to leverage some of those things. Again, our social worker is really good at helping people find the help that they need, either with finances or transportation. And we have other people within the system, nurse navigators, who are also going to be able to help with transportation issues as well. And then another thing to ask about really is, this is a thing where if you have friends, or you maybe have adult children who are living in a different part of the country who would like to be of help but can't be here because they live in Seattle and you live in Newton, is to recognize that sometimes the people who are at distance can help by defraying certain costs, like paying for meals to be delivered or setting up an Uber or a Lyft account for you so you can get rides back and forth without having to worry about the payment. And I think a lot of times people want to help if they know how to help. And reducing some of the financial burdens, that can be something that they can readily do if they're asked. So don't be afraid to speak up. This is hard to do because no one wants to talk about being impoverished or not being able to support themselves, but this is one of the places where it can be useful to access every single resource that you have available to you. Going back to work is a very common problem for folks who are of working age. And the positives of going back to work include, having a structured routine, knowing what to do, where to go, what to do when you get up in the morning. Oftentimes, colleagues can be really supportive. Obviously, earning money has an upside to it. And also feeling like you're getting back to normal in at least one part of your life can be really, really useful. There are downsides sometimes, though, and that's like going back to work sometimes means there's the pressure of deadlines, answering people's questions that are sometimes inappropriate, not necessarily feeling like you have the energy for a full day, but don't know about whether you can work part-time. So going back to work, it's not a given, but oftentimes it's useful. And really, you want to think about it as a balancing act, and there are pros and cons, and to see which way you're leaning, it's good to have sort of a conversation about it. And we can help with that conversation. So one of the first things is just after treatment is done, I would set the expectation of not trying to go back to work for 1 or 2 months afterwards. You may want to go back earlier, you may be able to go back earlier, but if you set the goal of give yourself a couple of months to really heal, that'll give your body time to go through a lot of the initial healing process that is often sort of under the radar until you start to feel it. When you're in that after treatment phase, you'll have some energy, and it's useful to talk to your boss or your supervisor about if there are ways that you could slowly transition back to work, and then make an explicit plan. Really put it in writing so that they know what to expect from you and you know what to expect as well. So examples of that are maybe working from home for the first few weeks with only 1 staff meeting a week, or start with 1 day a week and then add an extra day over the next several weeks. So over the course of a month or so, you may be going back full time. Looking into whether there are people who could job share with you. Look if there are less strenuous aspects of your job that you could start with, like answering phones or filing or editing or that kind of thing. And then also recognizing that you get to maybe think about having more control over your actual schedule, so that you might want to plan your commute off commute hours. So like if you can go to work from 10 until 2 at first, then you would miss the morning and the afternoon commutes. And that might help also reduce the strain of going back to work. It also is really useful if you do go back to work to have a shut up and shut off time, which is to say at lunch when you normally would go out and have lunch with your colleagues, it's okay to close your door if you have an office door, turn off the lights, and just relax. Let your body recover in the middle of the day, and that can help you get through the rest of the day. It's also important to look at your whole schedule. Think about including all your medical appointments, other family obligations, anything that's on your schedule. Again, think about that memory center. That is a place where you can keep track of all of it so that you can really begin to see where you're going to be spending your energy and when you need to rest. Remembering, of course, that everything takes energy. So if you spend it at work, you're not going to have it later. If you spend it in other places, you might not have it for work. So it's really, you're in charge of your energy. It's like a bank account. You get to spend it where you want to spend it, but just being more mindful of that as you go through it. Again, the master calendar thing we talked about during the cognitive strategy of having a memory center. This is an example of having that master calendar. And again, also talking about work a little, rest a little. This is another way to pace yourself throughout the day. If you are not feeling treated fairly by your employer, and this can happen, it's unfortunate, but it does happen, there are laws and legal remedies that are available to you. Now, this is not something that we do on site here, but if you want a resource for employment lawyers or other things, and there are online resources as well, which we'll go over in the final episode. this is just one of those things where it's good to talk about. We don't have the expertise here within the clinic to actually provide advice and counsel about employment law, but there are people in the community who are skilled in this, and we can help you find reasonable providers. Estate planning, again, this is something that we do not have the expertise to do here per se in certain areas. But oftentimes having a brush with mortality, having a serious illness like cancer makes people think about their future and what they want to do with their assets and obligations. And there are two parts of this. One is the medical forms that your physicians can help you with, and those are things like advanced directives, the MOLST form, which is about end-of-life measures, healthcare proxies, those sorts of things. And your doctors and our social worker here can really help you work through some of those things, and that's just an information about how you want your care to be done. Financial assets like your will, an estate plan, power of attorney, those sorts of things, those are more done by estate lawyers. And again, we don't do that here, but we can certainly help you find somebody if you don't already know of somebody who can help you do that. In general, one of the best ways to protect your assets is to have a thorough plan for how you want them handled, and doing it while you're still fully able to make all your own decisions is the best way to make sure that your own wishes are attended to. So the medical planning we can help you with here. Our palliative care team is very skilled at helping people think about those sorts of things. Again, financial planning we don't do here, but there are lawyers in the community who are very skilled at that. Talking with other people about what you've been through. This is also one of those weird conversations, like how do you talk about it with people? Most people you meet, once they've heard you have cancer, will have some story about cancer. And that can be either really useful and it can be uplifting and turn out that it's a really gratifying story to hear. And other times it can be just a very grim story where it's the worst case scenario and it's never clear why people want to share that, but they oftentimes feel like they do. Fellow cancer survivors, people who have been through what you've been through, and there are support groups in our area. Oftentimes they're helpful, but even they don't have your personal experience. So it's just important to remember that everybody's journey is a little different, and that you're the international expert on you. No one knows better than you what it's like to be inside your body and experience cancer as you have. So being able to recognize that is something that's special about you, and that you don't have to find someone who's exactly the same, but sometimes it's important to recognize that there are people who have shared your journey. So there are a couple of things. One is practicing an elevator speech. That is to say, you have a quick, precise, and sort of, not terse, but pretty short phrase for explaining when people are having well-intentioned but intrusive comments like, you look really good for a cancer survivor, or some other crazy thing. It's useful to be able to have a way of just responding to that really clearly, like, you know what, I'm doing really great, I'm doing the best I can with what I got today, and I'm just focusing on doing this project. And that's what I'm focused on, and I don't want to talk about the rest of it. So, like that idea of just having a really nice response, you think about ahead of time, actually helps make it a little less stressful when people say stupid stuff. It's also important to be able to aim people's good intentions by telling people what you do want and what you don't want. So, for example, I appreciate your desire to be supportive, but when you keep focusing on the illness, it's hard for me to focus on being healthy. So it would be great if you could just focus on what I'm doing to be healthy. Again, you're in charge of your story. You only have to share it with people you feel will be supportive. You're not obligated to tell anyone either the same thing or anything. So you get to decide. And if it helps, I would start with telling people the least amount first, and then people you trust, you can tell more. And then putting it all in context. So going through cancer treatment is often a watershed moment for lots of people. There will always be a difference between life before cancer and life after. This is true for everybody who goes through it. And for everybody, there's a balance of positive and negative elements that define what that experience was like. And for people who cope well in the post-treatment phase, in this survivorship phase, they always seem to do better when they try to make meaning out of what they've been through and to focus on what they have control over in that moment. So, and that's true whether it was a near miss, quote unquote, and it was a stage 0 and there's no need for further treatment, or whether it was stage 4 and it's going to be a chronic illness that has to be managed. recognizing that you are going to be walking that balance between pros and cons and making the most out of what you've got, that is what's going to help put it in context. So some people find meaning in the illness and will proudly wear their colored ribbon of whatever color there is on their clothing, and they will define themselves by that. There will be other people who will gladly put it behind them and move on, knowing that they were a member of a club they never wanted to belong to. And there are also people who just sort of do a little bit of both and really identify with being a cancer patient whenever they have to come in for an appointment, and the rest of the time they go back to their quote normal unquote life. So the truth is that you are a healthy person, you are living your life that way, and you get to decide how much you identify with the patient side of it. Wellness is a continuum, and we all live up on that benign innocence side on that far left until something happens. And it really doesn't matter what that thing is. It can be a stroke, cancer, heart attack, car accident, doesn't matter. Then we are on the continuum. And what we try to do is recognize that once that thing happens, we can't get back to benign innocence. That's the hard part. That's where a lot of the sadness comes in. But we can get back to a new normal that is fully well. And the thing we lose is that naivete or that innocence that nothing bad would happen to us, because we know something already did. But survivorship is all about doing whatever it takes to keep ourselves up at that as close as we can to full wellness, knowing that there are going to be days like maybe you just have the flu, or you missed your plane, or there's other things that make it more frustrating. We don't feel as well. And that's part of where we have control, is focusing on maximizing our wellness and minimizing our illness. Moving forward requires us to recognize there are going to be ebbs and flows in our lives. So we want to focus on what we have control over for as long as we can. And this would be true even if you'd never had that thing happen. If you've never had cancer, you never had the car accident, this wellness continuum, it's true for all of us. So going through cancer doesn't make that special. It just makes us more aware of it. So survivorship is about fully engaging with the life that you have and recognizing that you are in charge of the way you live it. Let us help you make the most out of all of it. Thanks for paying attention.